October 28th, 1929, Manhattan, New York. The AT&T building at 24 Dutch Street. The switchboard room, third floor. 3 rows of solid wood switchboards, hundreds of jacks, thousands of wires. Women in heavy headsets sit on wooden chairs, their fingers dancing between the plugs. Mildred Carter has worked here for 14 years. She's one of the best. Connects calls in under 4 seconds. Never makes a mistake. She's heard thousands of conversations, stockbrokers, bankers, politicians. She's used to the yelling, the tantrums, the begging. But what she hears this morning is worse than anything in her 14 years on the job. She plugs into a line. The number belongs to the office of J.P. Morgan, Jr. The voice on the other end, male, raspy, says, "Sell it all. Everything we have, copper, steel, railroads, everything, by the opening bell." Mildred freezes. She knows exactly who this is. She's connected his calls hundreds of times. It's Thomas Lamont, senior partner at Morgan Bank. He isn't panicking. He never panics. If he's saying, "Sell it all," it means something has happened. Something the rest of the world doesn't know yet. She connects the next line. A voice. "Charles, it's Richard. Listen to me very carefully. Pull everything out by 11 a.m. We have information. Roosevelt? No. The market. Tomorrow will be too late." The next line. A voice Mildred recognizes instantly. Joseph Kennedy, father of the future president. He says, "Sell. I said sell. I won't repeat myself. In an hour, you'll be thanking me." Mildred takes off her headset. She wipes the sweat from her forehead. She isn't supposed to listen. Her job is to connect the lines, not eavesdrop, but she can't help it. The voices are too loud. The panic is too real. She pulls out a small notepad, starts writing. The time, the number, who called, what they said. She doesn't know why she's doing it, maybe just for herself, maybe to tell someone later. She writes nonstop for 20 minutes. By 10 a.m., the calls start to quiet down. By 11 a.m., it's dead silent. At noon, Mildred goes to the restroom. She cries. Then she goes back to her switchboard. The very next day, October 29th, 1929, the market collapses. Black Tuesday. The Dow Jones drops 12% in a single day. Billions of dollars vanish into thin air. Thousands of investors are utterly ruined. Mildred looks down at her notepad. The names she wrote down? They're untouched. Morgan is safe. Kennedy is safe. They liquidated everything the day before. One day before the crash. A week later, 2 men approach Mildred. Suits. No badges. They introduce themselves. A T&T legal. One says, "Miss Carter, you heard some conversations on Monday morning. You need to forget what you heard." Mildred replies, "I didn't hear anything." The lawyer smiles. "We know. Show us your notepad." Mildred hands it over. The lawyer flips through the pages, nods, slides it into his briefcase. He says, "You made the right choice. A T&T values loyal employees." Mildred would go on to work at AT&T for another 23 years. She'd retire in 1952 and pass away in 1978 in a Long Island nursing home. But right before she died, she'd call a nurse over and say, "There's a box at the bottom of my trunk. Give it to my nephew." Inside that box, a notepad. Not the one the lawyers took, a different one, the copy. Her nephew, Charles Harris, would open that box a month after her funeral. Read the notes, call a lawyer. The lawyer would tell him, "Burn it." Charles didn't burn it. He took it to a university. In 2019, exactly 90 years after the crash, Mildred Carter's notes would finally be published in an academic journal. Today, you're going to find out what was actually in that notebook, the calls Mildred heard, who was on the line, and exactly what lengths AT&T went to make sure those records never saw the light of day. Mildred Carter was born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1895. Her father was a fireman, her mother a homemaker. The family squeezed into a tiny apartment on 3rd Avenue. Her father died fighting a fire in 1907. Mildred was just 12 years old. She dropped out of school to work. First, a corset factory, 10-hour shifts for $5 a week. Then, a salesgirl at a department store. Later, a waitress. In 1915, word got out that AT&T was hiring switchboard operators. The requirements: sharp hearing, perfect grammar, neat appearance, and strictly between 18 and 25 years old. Mildred checked every box. She nailed the interview. She was in. Training took 6 weeks. They taught her exactly how to speak. Number, please. Connecting. The line is clear. They taught her to sit perfectly straight. They taught her never to eavesdrop. They drilled it into her that every conversation was sacred. Mildred was the perfect student. She mastered the switchboard in record time. She had a photographic memory for numbers, memorizing every area code in Manhattan. Within a year, she was promoted to the premium service line, handling calls for banks, brokerages, and high-powered law firms. She listened to millions of conversations. Most of it was mind-numbing. Buy 100 shares. Sell 500. Price is up. Price is down. It was just background noise to her, but every now and then something strange slipped through. Are you sure? Yes. Is this legal? None of your business. Mildred never breathed a word to anyone. Operators took an oath. I will keep the secrets I hear as if they were my own. And she did. But she took notes, not to expose anyone, just for herself, to remember. By 1929, she was 34 years old. She had 14 years under her belt at AT&T. Her colleagues respected her. Her managers were slightly intimidated by her. She knew everyone's secrets, and she stayed quiet. Until October 28th, September 1929. America is riding an unprecedented high. The stock market has been surging for 8 straight years. Anyone can buy stocks on credit. You only need to put down a 10% margin. If a stock costs $100, you pay $10. If it climbs to $110, you've doubled your money. 100% profit. But if it drops to $90, your $10 is wiped out. And you still owe the broker $90. It's an insane system, but absolutely everyone is playing the game. Doormen are playing, doctors are playing, housewives are playing. The entire country believes the market will go up forever. October 3rd, 1929. Secretary of the Treasury Andrew Mellon gives a speech. He proudly declares, "The economy is fundamentally sound. There is no cause for alarm." A week later, the market drops 3%, then 5%, then 7%. By October 23rd, it plunges 6%. Newspapers try to spin it. A market correction. A technical pullback. A buying opportunity. Then comes October 24th, Black Thursday. The market tanks 11%. Wall Street's elite bankers hold an emergency meeting at J.P. Morgan's office. They pool their money to aggressively buy up stocks and halt the panic. It actually works. The market closes down just 2%. Over the weekend, the country breathes a sigh of relief. But on Monday, October 28th, the opening bell rings and the bottom falls out, down another 5%. Tuesday, October 29th, Black Tuesday. The market crashes 12%. $14 billion is completely wiped out in a single afternoon. To put that in perspective, the entire U.S. federal budget in 1929 was just $3 billion. Mildred Carter didn't know these macroeconomic numbers at the time. All she knew was what was flowing through her headset, and what she was hearing was something everyday Americans were never meant to hear. October 28th, 1929. Mildred clocks in. She's working the early shift, 8 to 4. The switchboard room is already buzzing. The click-clack of plugs and the murmur of operators blend into a steady hum. Mildred sits at her station, puts on her headset, plugs into the first flashing jack. First call comes in at 8:05. A woman's voice. "Connect me to Merrill Lynch." Mildred patches it through. The voice, on the other end. "Sell it all, immediately." Second call, male voice. "Get me Goldman Sachs." Mildred connects it. The voice. "Are we out? Completely? Good. Wait for my signal." By 8:30, the board lights up like a Christmas tree. Mildred can barely keep up. Her hands are moving faster than they ever have. At 8:45, she connects the call that changes everything. It's Thomas Lamont, senior partner at Morgan Bank. He says, "We have intelligence from the Federal Reserve. They are raising rates tomorrow. The market is going to collapse. Sell every position we have, everything, before the opening bell." Mildred scribbles in her notepad. 8:45, Lamont, Morgan. "Sell everything, before open. Fed info." Next call, 8:52 a.m. A voice. "Richard, it's Charles. Listen closely. Morgan is liquidating. I don't know where they got it, but they have a tip. Pull everything out by 11 a.m. Mildred writes, 8:52. Charles to Richard. Morgan selling by 11. 8:57 a.m. A call from Joseph Kennedy. He's a regular. Mildred knows his cadence. Kennedy barks, "Sell! I said sell. I won't repeat myself. In an hour, you'll be thanking me." Mildred writes, 8:57. Kennedy, sell. 9:10 a.m. Bernard Baruch, presidential advisor, is on the line. He says, "I just got off the phone with Hoover. He isn't going to step in. We're on our own. Sell it all." Mildred writes, 9:10. Baruch, "Hoover won't help. Sell." 9:30 a.m. The market officially opens. Mildred hears the tone of the calls shift from urgent to absolute panic. Voices are cracking. Grown men are screaming. One voice, "Did they know? Why didn't anyone warn us?" Another, "This is a crime. I'm ruined. Everything is gone." Mildred yanks off her headset, wipes the sweat from her face, looks down at her notepad. 20 distinct entries in just an hour and a half. The names staring back at her belong to the wealthiest men in America. They were dumping their shares while the average Joe was still buying. They knew what the public didn't. By 10 a.m., her lines go dead, because there's no one left to call. The men who needed to make calls had already made them. Now they're just sitting in their mahogany offices, pouring a stiff drink and watching it burn. Meanwhile, the poor souls who hadn't sold yet didn't even realize they had less than 24 hours before their lives were destroyed. Mildred slips the notebook into her desk drawer, turns the key, and slips the key into her pocket. October 29th, 1929. Mildred walks in at 8 a.m. The switchboard room is a ghost town. Usually it's a madhouse at this hour. Today it's dead silent. Operators are sitting with their hands folded in their laps. The board isn't lighting up. At 9:30 the market opens and immediately goes into free fall. Mildred gets her first ping at 9:35. A man is sobbing uncontrollably on the other end. "I lost it all, everything, my wife, my kids. What do I do?" Mildred connects the line. She doesn't even know who to. She just patches it through. At 10 a.m., the second call. A woman's voice trembling. "My husband just shot himself. He left a note. Tell me, is it true the bankers knew?" Mildred doesn't answer. She can't. She's forbidden to speak. At 11 a.m., the third call. An old man, his voice weak and raspy. 40 years. I saved for 40 years, sold the house, put it all in the market, and now I've got nothing. Mildred breaks down. The tears won't stop. Her shift supervisor walks over, taps her shoulder, and says firmly, "Miss Carter, pull yourself together." Mildred nods, wipes her face, keeps plugging away. That single day, 300 calls ran through her board. 150 of them were from people who had just been wiped out completely. 50 were from people who had just lost a family member to suicide. 10 calls were from men who had dumped their stock on Monday, calling their brokers to say thank you. And 90 calls were complete mysteries, because Mildred had stopped taking notes. She couldn't stomach it any more. Her notepad was already full of the names of the Wall Street elite who saved their own skin, and completely empty of the names of the working-class Americans who lost everything. A week after the crash, on November 5th, 1929, they came for Mildred. 2 men in dark, tailored suits, no badges, no business cards, just, "We're with AT&T Legal." The taller one, with graying temples, leaned in. "Miss Carter, we're aware you overheard some conversations on Monday morning. You need to forget what you heard." Mildred stared right back. "I didn't hear anything." The lawyer gave a tight smile. He pulled a sheet of paper from his briefcase. It was a log, an exact record of every call Mildred had connected on October 28th. The names, the timestamps, the durations. "We know you took notes, Miss Carter. Hand over the notepad." Mildred stared at the list. How did they know? AT&T tracked the metadata of every single call, not the audio recordings, but the footprint. Who called who, when, and for how long. They knew. They always knew. Mildred opened her drawer and handed over the notepad. The lawyer flipped through the pages. His eyes scanned the names. His expression didn't change once. He gave a single nod, slipped the book into his briefcase. "You've made the right choice, Miss Carter. AT&T takes care of loyal employees. If anyone asks, you heard nothing. You wrote down nothing. This notebook never existed. Are we clear?" Mildred nodded. "Good. Get back to work. You have a very bright future here at AT&T. Mildred would stay with the company for 23 more years. She'd be promoted to senior operator. She'd train the next generation of girls. And she never breathed a word of this story to a soul. Not to her co-workers, not to her friends, not even to her family. But she had made a copy, not the whole notebook, just the most damning entries, 15 pages in total. She hid them in a shoebox, buried it at the very bottom of a heavy trunk, buried under old blankets, throw pillows, and faded photographs. That copy would sit in the dark for half a century. Mildred wasn't the only one. All across the country, switchboard operators were hearing the exact same whispers, and a few of them were taking notes too. Deep in the AT&T archives, files that were quietly declassified in the 1980s, there's a paper trail of letters from these women. One of them was from a girl named Alice Morgan, working the board in Boston. She wrote, October 28th, 1929, 9 a.m. I patched a call from a bank executive. He said, "The market's crashing tomorrow. Liquidate everything." I asked my manager what I should do. He told me, "Nothing. You didn't hear a thing." Another letter came from Helen Grant in Philadelphia. She wrote, "That morning, I routed 5 calls from the exact same office. Every single one said the same thing. Sell. tomorrow is too late. I wrote down the numbers. The next day, Black Tuesday hit. I showed my notes to my supervisor. He threw them straight into the incinerator. Then there was Ruth Baker in Chicago. She wrote, "On the 28th, a man called and demanded I put him through to a broker. I connected them. He said, 'Sell every share in my wife's name. Don't ask questions.' I memorized the name on the account. It was Samuel Insull, the head of Chicago Edison. He dumped his wife's portfolio the day before the crash. She lost everything. He walked away clean." These letters were actually compiled in 1985 in a highly obscure book titled Operators of the Great Depression. Only 1,000 copies were ever printed. Hardly anyone noticed it, except AT&T's legal department. They immediately slapped the publisher with a massive lawsuit for violating corporate confidentiality. The publisher caved and recalled the book. The remaining copies were pulped and destroyed. You have to understand, in 1929, AT&T was an absolute monopoly. They controlled 90% of the telephone infrastructure in the United States. They practically wrote their own laws. One of their internal policies was, all telephone routing logs are kept for 30 days, then destroyed. The official excuse was that it saved physical storage space. The unofficial reason? It ensured that nobody could ever leave a paper trail proving they had insider knowledge. In 1929, AT&T wiped the logs for October 28th entirely off the map. All of them. Millions of calls, hundreds of thousands of connections between the most powerful bankers, brokers, and politicians in the world. Gone, incinerated, shredded. The official PR line, routine disposal in accordance with standard corporate policy. Highly convenient, right? 4 years later, in 1933, the U.S. Senate launched the Pecora Commission to investigate the true causes of the Wall Street crash. They subpoenaed the call logs from AT&T. AT&T politely replied, "The records no longer exist." The senators demanded to know why. AT&T shrugged. Corporate policy. The Senate committee hit a brick wall. Without the logs, they couldn't prove a thing. But Mildred Carter knew the truth. She knew the logs were destroyed on purpose. She knew AT&T was lying through their teeth, and she knew her notepad was the only smoking gun left on Earth. That's exactly why she made the copy, and why she hid it away. Mildred passed away in 1978. A month after her funeral, her nephew, Charles Harris, popped open that old trunk and found the shoebox. Inside were those 15 fragile pages, the call logs from October 28, 1929. The timestamps, the names, the exact quotes. Charles read them. His blood ran cold. He immediately called his lawyer. The lawyer's advice was blunt. Burn it right now. If AT&T finds out you have this, they will sue you into oblivion. But Charles couldn't do it. He took the pages to a history professor at Columbia University. The professor looked them over and handed them back, saying, "There's not enough conclusive proof here." Not because the proof wasn't solid, but because the professor was terrified of the blowback. Flash forward to 2019. Exactly 90 years after the crash, a single page from that notebook leaked onto the internet. It read, 8:45, Lamont, Morgan, sell everything, before open, Fed info. The historical community completely fractured. Some experts declared it an authentic bombshell. Others called it an elaborate hoax. The cynics just shrugged. Even if it's real, they're all dead anyway. What difference does it make now? Within 72 hours, the page was scrubbed from the site. AT&T released a brief statement denying any involvement in the takedown. To this day, Mildred Carter's full notebook has never been released to the public. October 28, 1929, 8:45 a.m. The AT&T Switchboard room in Lower Manhattan. A working-class operator named Mildred Carter hears the voice of Thomas Lamont. "Sell everything. Fed info." She writes it down. 29 hours later, the American economy implodes. Millions of everyday citizens lose everything they've ever worked for. Lamont didn't lose a dime. Kennedy didn't lose a dime. Baruch walked away rich. They all sold out at the top, all thanks to insider information they got before the public had a clue. Mildred didn't sell anything. She didn't own a single stock. She was making $30 a week. She lived in a cramped apartment. She took the subway to work. She bought her groceries at the corner deli. She wasn't one of the elite, but she was a witness, and she documented exactly what she saw. She did it so the truth would outlive the cover-up, even if no one ever read her words. 90 years later, we know her name. Mildred Carter, switchboard operator, witness to the greatest financial crime of the 20th century. We still don't know where the physical notebook is today. We don't know who confiscated it. We don't even know if it hasn't been burned to ash. But we know it existed. Mildred had absolutely no reason to lie. You can draw your own conclusions. I'm not here to force mine on you. Thanks for watching until the very end.